The rifle bolt clicked behind Johann's head, and the German guard whispered in broken English, "Tonight, I help you escape." Johann Fischer froze. His breath hung in the frozen air of Stalag 4B like a ghost refusing to leave. For 14 months he'd been a prisoner in this hellhole carved from Saxon mud and barbed wire. For 14 months, guards had beaten him, starved him, worked him until his hands bled into the snow. And now, on Christmas Eve 1944, with Allied bombers painting the eastern sky orange every night, and the Third Reich collapsing like a house of cards, this guard, this Nazi, wanted to help him escape? It made no sense. Nothing made sense anymore. The date was December 24th, and Johann was 23 years old, though the mirror in the commandant's washroom, which he'd cleaned just yesterday, had shown him the face of a man twice that age. Sunken eyes, hollow cheeks, skin stretched over bone like canvas over a frame. The B-17 tail gunner from Ohio, who'd once weighed 180 pounds, now tipped the scale at maybe 110, if the scale was generous. "You're insane," Johann whispered back, not daring to turn around. They stood in the shadow of Barracks 7, where the December wind cut through the wooden slats like frozen knives. "Tell kill us both." "Ja," the guard agreed. His name was Dieter, Johann knew. 20 years old. Too young for this war. Too broken by it to ever be whole again. "Do what?" Johann asked. "Tomorrow," Dieter said, and his voice cracked. "Tomorrow morning, we receive orders. We are to liquidate the camp, all prisoners, before the Russians come." The words hung between them like poison gas. Johann's legs went weak. He'd heard rumors, of course, whispers that filtered through the camp like smoke, stories from the eastern camps, places with names that sounded like death itself, Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor. But Stalag 4B was different. It was a POW camp, governed by Geneva Convention rules, inspected by the Red Cross. Prisoners here weren't murdered, they were worked, they were starved, they were beaten. But they weren't executed en masse. Were they? "You're lying," Johann said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew Dieter wasn't. The terror in the young German's eyes was too real. "I have seen the order," Dieter insisted, "signed by the commandant himself. No witnesses, he says, no prisoners to tell the Russians what happened here." He grabbed Johann's arm with surprising strength. "There are children here, the Polish workers. They have children in Barracks 12. I cannot, God help me, I cannot shoot children." Johann thought of Barracks 12. He'd seen them, the Polish and Czech forced laborers from the nearby munitions factory. Families, though calling them that was generous. Skeletal women with babies who cried without sound because they lacked the strength for noise. Old men who looked like walking corpses. And yes, children. Maybe 20 of them, ranging from infants to teenagers. The Third Reich had already stolen their futures. Tomorrow it would steal their lives. "What do you want me to do?" Johann asked. His voice sounded distant to his own ears, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "I am on watch until 300, North Tower. There is a section of fence near the latrines. The wire is loose. I loosened it myself 3 nights ago. At 2:35, I will aim my spotlight at the south fence. The other guards, they will look where I look. You will have maybe 3 minutes, maybe 4. And then what? Run into the Saxon countryside in December? I'll freeze to death before dawn. Better than a bullet." Dieter thrust something into Johann's hand. A small bundle, wrapped in cloth. "Bread, cheese, a map. 10 kilometers west, there is a farmhouse. Red roof, broken windmill. The woman there, her name is Frau Engel. Tell her Dieter sent you. Tell her the sparrow flies at midnight." "The sparrow—" "Just tell her." Dieter's voice rose, then dropped to a desperate whisper. "I have a brother, ahead, Werner. He was a prisoner in Russia. The Soviets, they sent me his wedding ring in a box. Just the ring. Nothing else." He wiped his eyes roughly. "I cannot save Werner, but maybe I can save someone else's brother." Before Johann could respond, Dieter straightened, shouldered his rifle, and walked away into the darkness, just another guard making his rounds. Johann stood there, clutching the bundle, his mind racing. Everything in him screamed that this was a trap, that Dieter was lying, that he'd run for that fence and be cut down before he made it 3 steps. The Germans had done worse to trick prisoners into escape attempts just for the sport of hunting them down. But what if it wasn't a trap? What if tomorrow really was the end? He thought of the men in his barracks, Jimmy O'Connor from Boston, who sang Irish songs in his sleep, Philippe Moreau, the French resistance fighter who'd been caught blowing up a rail line, Mikhail Kowalski, the Polish underground courier who spoke 6 languages and had memorized entire passages of poetry to keep his mind sharp. They were his brothers now, bonded by suffering in a way that transcended nationality. And the children in Barracks 12, God, the children. Johann made his decision. Getting word to the others was the hardest part. The camp was locked down after dark, prisoners confined to barracks under threat of being shot on sight. But Johann had spent 14 months learning every shadow, every routine, every weak point in the German security. He'd never used that knowledge because escape seemed impossible, until tonight. He moved like a ghost, using the shadow between the searchlight sweeps. Barracks 5 first, where he found Philippe awake, as always. The Frenchman never slept more than an hour at a time, his body trained by months in the resistance. "We're getting out," Johann whispered. "Tonight. Pass it along, anyone who can walk." Philippe's eyes widened. "Mon ami, this is suicide." "Staying is suicide. They're going to kill us all tomorrow." Something in Johann's voice must have convinced him, because Philippe nodded slowly. "How many can we take?" "As many as will come." They spread the word like firewood through dry grass, moving from barracks to barracks. Not everyone believed them. Not everyone could walk, even if they wanted to. Disease, injury, starvation. The camp had broken many beyond repair. But by 0200 hours, Johann had assembled 23 POWs in the shadow of Barracks 4. 23 skeletons in striped uniforms, shivering in the December cold, ready to bet their lives on the word of a Nazi guard. "You're sure about this, Johnny?" Jimmy O'Connor gripped Johann's arm. "No," Johann admitted, "but I'm sure about tomorrow if we stay." At 1500 hours, Johann made his way to Barracks 12. This was the riskiest part. The forced laborers were kept separate from the POWs, watched more closely because the Germans feared sabotage. But Johann had befriended a Polish woman named Kasia, who worked in the camp kitchen. She had a daughter, 7 years old, eyes like dark pools that had already seen too much. Kasia listened to his whispered explanation with an expression that broke his heart. She didn't ask if he was certain. She didn't question the plan. She just nodded and began waking the others. "We cannot take everyone," she whispered. "The old ones, the sick ones, they will slow us down." "Then they come anyway," Johann said firmly. "We all go, or none of us do." Kasia's eyes filled with tears. "You will die for this kindness." "I'll die anyway." At 0230 exactly, the spotlight in the North Tower swung dramatically to the south fence. Johann heard shouting, Dieter, yelling about movement, about possible escape activity. The other guards responded exactly as predicted, rushing towards the commotion, their attention fixed on the wrong section of perimeter. "Now," Johann hissed. They moved as fast as their broken bodies allowed. 23 POWs, 18 forced laborers, 6 children, including Kasia's daughter, who clung to her mother without making a sound. 47 ghosts fleeing towards a loose section of wire that represented their only chance at survival. Johann reached the fence first. The wire was indeed loose, cut at the bottom and bent upward. Not a large gap, but enough. He held it open, feeling the barbs bite into his palms, not caring. Go! Go! They crawled through one by one. Philippe, Jimmy, Mikhail, the Polish mothers with their children, old men who probably wouldn't survive the night but crawled through anyway because dying free was better than dying in a cage. The spotlight remained fixed on the south fence. The shouting continued. Dieter was buying them time with his life because there was no way that he'd survive this. The moment the Germans discovered the escape, Dieter would be executed as a traitor. 30 people through. 35. 40. Come on, Jimmy urged from the other side. Johnny, we gotta move. 43. 40.
He woke to the sound of voices. German voices. Johann's eyes snapped open. He was in the barn, buried under hay with a dozen others. Through the cracks in the wood he could see the farmhouse yard. 3 Wehrmacht soldiers stood there, talking to Frau Engel. "We are searching for escaped prisoners," one soldier said. 47 of them. "Dangerous criminals." "I have seen no one," Frau Engel replied calmly. "Just my husband and myself." "You will not mind if we search?" "Of course not." Johann's heart hammered. Next to him, Kasia held her daughter, hand over the girl's mouth. They all held their breath as the soldiers walked toward the barn. The door opened, sunlight streamed in. Johann could see the soldiers' boots not 5 meters away. "Just hay and shit," one soldier complained. "Let's check the house." "Wait." The other soldier moved closer. He was staring right at the hay pile where Johann and the others hid. "I thought I saw..." A sound from the farmhouse, breaking glass. "Was ist das?" The soldiers turned, running back toward the house. They found Josef inside, bleeding from a cut on his hand, a broken milk bottle on the floor. "Entschuldigung," the old man apologized. "My hands shake." Old age. The soldiers looked at him, at the broken glass, suspicious but uncertain. Finally, the senior one nodded. "All right. But if you see anything, you will report it." "Verstehen?" "Ja," Josef said. They left. Johann didn't breathe properly for another hour. Mikhail's group arrived that evening. Only 8 of them left, half dead from exposure and pursuit. They brought news. Philippe's group had been captured. All killed, except possibly 2 who escaped in the chaos. 16 had become 21. Out of 47. Frau Engel and Josef hid them in a cellar beneath the barn. A space dug out for smuggling Jews, they learned. It was cramped, cold and dark, but it was safe. They stayed there for 3 days, barely moving while German patrols scoured the countryside. On the 4th day, they heard a new sound. Artillery. Distant, but growing closer. "The Americans," Josef said, bringing them food. "Maybe 1 week, maybe 2. You must stay hidden until then." But on the 4th day, the Germans came back, a full platoon this time. With dogs. The animals went mad, barking and straining at the barn. "There's something here," a soldier shouted. Johann looked at the others in the cellar. At Kasia and her daughter. At Jimmy, who'd survived everything, only to be caught now. At Mikhail, whose poetry couldn't save them. The cellar door was hidden, but the dogs knew they were here. It was over. Then, from above, They are mine. Frau Engel's voice. What? A German soldier asked. The prisoners. They are mine. I am hiding them. Silence. Then the sound of a rifle bolt. You admit to harboring enemies of the Reich? I admit to harboring human beings. You know the penalty for this. I do. Johann was already moving, pushing up the cellar door. Jimmy grabbed him. Don't. I won't let her die for us. Johann climbed out, emerging into the barn. Soldiers surrounded him immediately, rifles raised. Wait, Johann shouted. She didn't know. We forced our way in. She's innocent. But Frau Engel was smiling sadly. Liar, poor liar. She looked at the German officer. Do what you must, Hauptmann. But these people have suffered enough. The officer stared at her. He was young, maybe 30, with a face carved from exhaustion. Behind him his soldiers looked equally hollow. The whole German army was hollow now, a shell of what it had been. How many? The officer asked quietly. 21, Frau Engel said. Gott im Himmel. The officer closed his eyes. Then he opened them and looked at his men. Schütze-Weber, your assessment. A young soldier, couldn't have been older than 18, stepped forward. He looked into the barn, at Johann, then down at the cellar where the others hid. I see nothing, Hauptmann. No prisoners. Just hay. The officer looked at another soldier. Obergruppenreiter Schneider. Nothing here, sir. The dogs must have smelled old blood. Frau Engel butchers her own livestock, ja? One by one, the soldiers reported seeing nothing. The officer listened, his face unreadable. Finally, he turned back to Frau Engel. It seems my men have found nothing. We will continue our search elsewhere. He paused. But you should know, Frau Engel, that you are playing a dangerous game, and these are dangerous times. These have always been dangerous times, Hauptmann. The officer nodded slowly. Then he did something that made Johann's breath catch. He saluted. A crisp, formal military salute to a civilian woman who just confessed to treason. Frohe Weihnachten, the officer said quietly. Merry Christmas. Then he turned and left, his platoon following. The Americans arrived 9 days later. Johann heard them before he saw them, the rumble of Sherman tanks, the sound of English being spoken by people who weren't prisoners. He and the others emerged from the cellar like creatures from a grave, blinking in the winter sunlight. A young American lieutenant stared at them. Jesus Christ, who are you? Prisoners, Johann said. His voice was hoarse from disuse. From Stalag 4B. That camp's been empty for a week. We thought they'd killed everyone. The lieutenant's face went pale. How many of you? 21. Here, there might be others. 2 from another group, maybe still out there. The lieutenant called for medics. For food, for transport. Johann watched it happen as if from a great distance. Freedom. After 14 months, he was free. But he couldn't feel it yet. Frau Engel appeared beside him. You will be all right now. You saved us. All of us. Why? She smiled sadly. Because someone needed to. She pressed something into my hand, a small wooden sparrow. crudely carved. My son made these before the war. He died in Russia. I like to think that maybe someone showed him kindness at the end. Maybe someone, somewhere, chose mercy over hate. I closed my fingers around the sparrow. I'll never forget you. Then I have done enough. They found 2 survivors from Philippe's group 3 days later, hiding in a drainage ditch. Philippe himself was gone. Of the original 47 who escaped Stalag 4B on Christmas Eve 1944, 23 survived. The camp itself had been abandoned when the Americans arrived. The German guards had fled ahead of the Soviet advance, taking the commandant with them. But in the commandant's office, American investigators found the order, the one Dieter had mentioned. Mass execution, scheduled for Christmas Day, 1944. No prisoners to remain alive. It would have happened if not for one German guard who chose humanity over duty. They never found Dieter's body. Johann looked. He requested permission to search the camp to find the young man who'd sacrificed everything. But Dieter had disappeared, whether into a mass grave or into the chaos of a collapsing Germany. Johann never learned. Johann returned to Ohio in the spring of 1945. He weighed 140 pounds, better, but still hollow. His mother cried when she saw him. His father, a World War I veteran, just nodded and shook his hand, understanding what words couldn't